Mr. Icke, welcome in Croatian Parliament.
Thank you, Ivan.
Which is this, what time are you in Croatia now?
Well, I've been here since Monday night, but I've been here now 5 times.
5 times to Croatia?
Yeah, to speak, and it's amazing, you know, walking along the street. Number of times you get stopped in another country for people who've seen your information. It's very encouraging. But you know, most encouraging for me on this trip is that you and your fellow members of the Living Wall Human Shield Party have got seats in Parliament, and you are addressing publicly, nationally, a lot of the things that I've been writing about all these years, about how the world's really controlled, the banking system and GMOs and endless other things. It's a sign, isn't it? When you look at Brexit and you look at other things that are happening, that people are reaching that point where they're saying, enough, we're not having it anymore.
I will just give you an example. In EU, when there is a directive that GMO food must be allowed on the level of European Union, a particular country cannot block it. So we can in Croatia oppose GMO food, but we are not allowed to, let's say, block its import. And in essence, EU is not democratic at all, whatsoever. And Mr. Icke, when I was a kid, I remember it was elementary school. I had a neighbor, she was an older woman, and I told her, she told me, Ivan, the government, they are not the ones who rule. Mm-hmm. I said, like, how you mean? We had a president, prime minister. She said, no, it's the people behind the scenes. And she spoke about like the one who controls the money and so on. But to me it sounded a bit strange, because those people who control the money, you can't see them on the news. They are not household names. They don't appear on TV shows. They don't argue. And what's funny, we politicians, to get in a seat to make decisions, we must run for elections, and this elite, they don't. No. They are just there all the time, and we politicians are changing, and the true power is the same. And I have said in our parliament, this is a Muppet show, because the vast majority of MPs supports this financial system, the people who run the ship, and it is actually, we call it, one guy called it democratic puppets, because they are elected through election process, but they don't represent those who voted for them. Because in our parliament, for example, it's not like initiative comes from the bottom, from the people, and then the representatives present it to parliament, and then it's voted. No, it's other way around. It is from the top. The financial elite says this and this law has to be passed. Then it comes to the ruling party in government, prime minister. He says to his majority in parliament, you must vote this, and it's just voted. And what I read from you is when opposition and those who rule exchange, then those which were until yesterday against, today are for. Can you say that? Explain it.
Yeah, I mean, the political system is so blatant for anyone with eyes to see, and it's great that you, as a member of the Croatian Parliament, have seen it from the inside. Basically, in almost every country, you have 2, maybe 3, sometimes parties that can form a government. So you vote for Party A,
exactly.
And Party A gets in, and you don't like what they do. So then you vote for Party B to get Party A out. You don't like what Party B does, but to get Party B out, you've got to vote for Party A. I'll tell you a story. I was in Ukraine. You know Yanukovych, the president, who has been ousted in 2 externally manipulated coups now. There was the Orange Revolution in 2004, another George Soros-inspired revolution. And they threw him out in Ukraine because of corruption, etc. I then went there to speak in 2011, and Yanukovych is president again. The one they threw out in revolution. This is how it happened. They threw him out in the Orange Revolution. Another guy came in. They didn't like what he did, but to get him out, the only way they could do it was vote for the other party that had any chance of forming a government, and Yanukovych was still leading it. So they then voted back into power someone they threw out in a revolution. This is the rigged system. And
it's so funny how the media controls people's mind. And I once joked, I said, even if the devil himself was leading the government party, 3/4 of their voters would still vote for them.
Yeah.
So people just vote for the establishment by default. And the problem is with pensioners, because pensioners, they don't have access to internet. They can see only what TV tells them. And also there are people who profit from the system. They also, of course, vote for those parties. But the young people, they are waking up. We can see it in elections when we see how many people of particular age vote for us. There is vast difference, like 8 times are young people more likely to vote for us than pensioners.
the young people put you into parliament then?
Young people put me into parliament, and when I wanted to say, when that woman, when I was a child, she told me that there are these elites ruling. I thought she was crazy. If I met David Icke, like when I was 14 and not now when I'm 31, I would think this guy is madman. What is he speaking about? And as time went on, there were more and more, let's say, strange things coinciding. Like, and if there are so many coincidences that it makes no logic. It makes logic only when all these coincidences you connect, and then you have a broad picture, and then you open your eyes and you see there is a conspiracy. And yesterday when I was speaking in Parliament, I said we could solve financial problems of our country if the government would have the authority to issue real money, and not banks creating fake money from nothing and loaning it with interest. And I said to my colleagues, there is no logic why you would oppose logical solution. Because when you put all the arguments, it's more logical that money, which is in essence a public good because everyone needs it,
Yeah.
is issued by government just as water supply or whatever, and not by private entities which actually create it out of nothing. That was the most shocking for me, to realize that in Croatia, for example, 3/4 of all deposits are imaginary. They don't exist in reality. In America, it's 9/10.
Lending people money that doesn't exist and charging them interest on it.
And then they say you can't return it and you must lose your home. That's the way system functions.
Extraordinary. But one of the biggest blocks there is on people looking at the world from this perspective is they cannot believe that anyone would scam them to the vast extent that they're scammed. No, they wouldn't do that. Yeah, but they are doing that. It is this chasm of difference between what's happening in the world and what people are told is happening, that when they look at people like me, they go, you've got to be crazy. They'd never be doing that. We'd know about it.
People think in Croatia that the reason why we have failed policies is because our politicians are failure on a personal level. So then they oust one and bring another one. But no matter how many politicians they exchange, the policies continue the same. And I tried to explain them that it's not politicians' fault. It's the system's fault, and politicians are just representing that corrupt system.
Pawns in that system, and they almost have to persuade themselves that they're not pawns. Otherwise, they'd have to look in the mirror and say, basically, I'm an irrelevance given the way that I'm doing it at the moment.
They think that people think that Parliament has the power, and I tell them, no, you don't decide anything. And I said the only thing that I influence in Parliament is how long discussion will be. That's the only thing I influence, because those who are for establishment, those who represent these banking cartels, they have a majority, and what's worse, the opposition, they control the opposition and the ruling party. So no matter who gets elected, one guy, he wrote me a message, he said, Ivan, it's so bizarre that it doesn't matter who I vote for if I don't vote for you, because they all are the same elite. And often you have these people from corporate world go into government and then go back from government to corporate world.
That happens all over the world.
They make a law which favors a particular corporation, and then that corporation, they don't necessarily bribe them directly. No, when they are finished, for example, we had a situation in one coastal place where a local politician, he gave an island in a concession for 100 years to a foreign corporation. And now, when he finished his term, now he's director of the hotel on that island. So it's like a legal way of bribing. And when you say, oh, that's they have conspired together, or they say, no, why would they conspire? There is no conspiracy; it's just a pure coincidence.
Yeah, they're all coincidences. Yeah, one of the ways to break through this is, for me, is for people to stop voting for parties and start voting for people. Is this person honest? Does he appear genuine? What is he saying? What's his background?
What's his position on
Yeah, exactly.
Today, the key questions are never raised. So on the news, when there is a discussion, like pre-election campaign, they ask you questions which are not relevant at all. And I said, they ask you like, every time they ask you about abortion, every time they ask you about gays, they never ask you, what's your position of debt-based monetary system? What do you think about privatization of money system, of money supply? What do you think about unpayability of debt? Because interest doesn't exist. It's only principle exists.
Yeah.
And such big questions are never raised. They don't ask people, what do you think about NATO wars, American bombing of every day another country? No. They ask you, they don't ask you about like imports of GMOs, which EU demands. They ask you only non-relevant issues. And then even people who are aware, they are not able to choose politician they like. Because the questions are never raised, and also, if you are not part of the elite, media don't let you in.
No.
You can't get for the same table.
See, we're sitting in Croatia, but you could be talking in London, you could be talking in the French Parliament, you could be talking on Capitol Hill, because the same structure of control of debate and the irrelevance of political debate is the same everywhere. So it's kind of in our face. It's a global structure.
I have seen Professor Noam Chomsky. He said, it doesn't matter how wide is discussion. Only thing that is important is to control the subject of discussion. For example, if you and me were on CNN, we could discuss, is better Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola?
Yeah.
Or is it better burger in McDonald's or Burger King? That's things we could discuss freely and why. But if we would discuss these, let's say, critical things, they'd say, no, mic is off.
But you must have had some success, given the platform you've got here, in getting even more people to think by some of the things you said.
The way we got into Parliament is a secret, and now I will tell you the secret. As all the media were controlled, I realized that with alternative ideas, you can't get in. And people are not interested in this, for example, monetary system stuff. They don't care. And I was thinking what to do. And then I said to my friends, look, banks are taking people's homes. People can't repay debt, since debt is unpayable. And I said, let's block evictions. And we formed a political party And we started blocking evictions of people from their homes. And police would come, they would drag us and kick family out, and we would put it on a live. Let's live stream it. And this police violence during bank evictions was something for awakening, because people knew there are many people in such situation, and also we told to police personnel, you're just the puppets, they're using you. You have no profit from this what you're doing. And I said once, even your employee, the state of Croatia, they can't pay their debts either. And one day you will do the same like this family you're throwing out.
Yeah.
And this speech of mine was very viral, and also this live, let's say, emission from these evictions, home evictions, they were very viral too. And we had hundreds of thousands of people seeing that, and we have managed to break this censorship with sensation. And forced eviction, foreclosure, that's sensation. And when I have read that in America there were 3.5 million foreclosures, and that people have not organized themselves together. They didn't say, hey, neighbor,
Yeah, exactly.
we both get out, let's resist, and let's make it as a political issue. That's what surprised me. And in Croatia, we have made a political issue out of evictions, and it brought us into parliament.
Yeah, full enough, today, appropriately, there's a video I did from way back at the time of the evictions, pointing this out, saying, look, how many people are being subject to this, and how many people are making it happen? A very, very few. So why are we not surrounding houses and not letting the authorities in? And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Because if we don't stand together, then the few can control the many. When we do, they can't. And this is why divide and rule. It's everywhere. Divide and rule. Colour and income bracket.
Yeah. I want to tell you, Mr. Icke, many politicians, they say one thing and then they say another thing.
Yeah,
and when you block eviction with your own body, when you as an elected representative, as an MP, stand in front of someone's house and police say, if you were a criminal, if you've stolen public money, police has no authority over you, but because you have immunity. But when you stand in front of someone's house, this immunity doesn't apply to you. And then people realize that we are not part of the elite, that we are one of them. And we have, how to say, people say, yeah, but these people who get evicted, they are not the majority of the society. They are not, but these evictions are like firecrackers, because there are many people which are unsatisfied with the way things are going on, and they see finally there is someone resisting, there is someone who opposes this policy for real, not for fake, because it's not just that system controls opposition and ruling party. They make fake opposition too.
Yeah,
they create a fake political party which in theory like thinks like you, but in practice they are one of them. And what they are mostly feared of is a real opposition. And in Croatia we have managed to give a real opposition. For example, Trump in America, he was, let's say, opposition to mainstream, opposition to mass media. But in the key issues, he thinks the same regarding occupation of Palestine, control of federal reserves by Rothschild family. And those are the key questions. What are your position on that? And on that critical issues, all American presidents think the same.
Yeah, I mean, Trump gave the American economy to Goldman Sachs almost from the day he took over. I mean, that is not draining the swamp; it's filling it.
But never forget, David. Trump was on the verge of bankruptcy, and banks bailed him out. Banks saved him, and once he's elected, those banks that saved his ass, he's saving their ass.
Which is kind of extraordinary. I'm sure you've been following this, given where you're coming from. That such a large part of the alternative media, as was in America, has bought the Trump illusion. And this is what we were talking about this yesterday. The power of telling people what they want to hear as opposed to what they don't want to hear. So Trump was telling the alternative media a few things he wanted to hear, and suddenly they jumped behind him. And now they are ignoring things that they would have highlighted had Obama or Bush have done it. They're ignoring it when he does it because they've basically tied their colours to him.
Yeah.
And
it's like a football team.
They're an alternative mainstream media in the way they operate. They're ignoring things that are bad for Trump because they support Trump.
I will give you another example. I supported Bernie Sanders. I said, oh, this guy, he speaks good things about Federal Reserves and so on. And then I liked his page. I said to all my friends, vote for Bernie Sanders if you're in America. And then suddenly you hear Bernie Sanders, he supports Hillary. I said, what? How can you support that woman, you know?
Yeah.
It's, he didn't care about spreading the message. He had no idea like a movement. He was just a guy from establishment who took alternative position, and when he didn't win, he just switched back to mainstream.
See, that's the thing. I mean, I said at the time when he did that, if you're not going to be a rebel at 74, when are you going to start? And being a rebel is not telling that part of the Democratic Party what he wants to hear. Good old Bernie. It's standing up at the Democratic Convention when the vote's coming for Clinton and saying, I cannot support Donald Trump, but I neither can support Hillary Clinton because they're both expressions of the same system, which is absolutely what I don't stand for. Instead, he speaks on their behalf. This is the way it works, like you say, the fake opposition.
Mr. Icke, you have told me before this live stream about financial component, which is very, very important. We in Croatia are lucky because we are funded by the government, and that's crazy. I can't understand it. We are getting actually huge amounts of money, like €500,000 euros, and also I have a big salary as an MP. And what I do, I subvert the system, and I said, that's so crazy. If you run for elections with alternative views, and if you get elected, the government, the system will finance you for destroying it. And if we did not get into this political scene, we would very hardly keep our operations going on.
Right.
Because you must pay your bills. You can't, fight for let's say particular issues, and you must have a regular job. And Mr. Icke told me how now YouTube is killing the alternative media. And can you say about that?
Yeah, it's very important. It's very topical because it's basically just happening. Like you say, if you're going to do this full time, and I'm not talking from the point of view of poor me here, because we do not depend on YouTube. We do not. We have the books and other things and the talks that keep us going. But much of the alternative media, especially that which increasingly is the part that makes all the videos exposing things, to do that full time, and you have to do it full time to do it properly, has survived on the so-called monetization of their videos. They have advertising and the number of hits they get. It's a small number, but it adds up. And it's not a fortune, but it's enough for many people
keep operations going on.
To keep working full time. So what they've done, a newspaper in Britain ran a story recently that the major companies were having their advertisements put onto, quote, extremist videos by YouTube. And it was all coordinated, of course it was, because then there was 250 companies who'd never actually noticed before, but now suddenly all together in unity, all saw it together. And
what a coincidence!
Yeah, what a coincidence! And they then stopped their advertisements with YouTube. And so, of course, YouTube, which is owned by the monster that is Google, said, "Oh, we've got to do something about this." Well, we don't really want to. We've got to do something about it. And instead of demonetizing, as they say, truly extremist videos, like people being beheaded and stuff, they've demonetized the alternative media, putting a different slant on politics, not an extreme slant, a different slant, and it's all coordinated. I have the best part of 800,000 likes on my Facebook page, The vast majority of those people never see what is posted on my Facebook page now through something called ghost banning, where Facebook use algorithms to make sure that only a fraction of those people ever see anything I post. Twitter's starting to do it since it changed hands. Google uses algorithms to push down the search engine listings, things that are alternative against things that are mainstream. But challenging as all this is, Ivan, it's actually a very positive statement, because if we weren't being effective, they wouldn't be doing it. And it's clear that we have touched a nerve and continue to do so, and your election and your party's election is a great confirmation of that in Croatia. So it's a challenge, but it's also a positive thing in the sense that we are making a difference.
I just wish to say something about the fake news, because in France they are making a legislation to basically fine or even imprison people for saying fake news. And what happens when all the media in France have said that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction and Iraq didn't have it? It's obvious that those news about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction were fake news.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were disseminated by the government. And what happens when government says fake news? They say, and they know it's fake, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Government will never be held accountable, because government will always say, oh, like, we thought they do have, but it seemed out they don't, you know.
Well,
but what if you said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, for example? Oh, then they say, oh, you are spreading fake news, and they find it. So the essence of this fake news blocking is not to make media reporting the truth, because it's all based on lies, in essence. Mass media is 90% fake news. And the aim is to kill financially anyone who thinks differently than the mainstream.
Classic fake news now. Russia's responsible for everything. If it was switched and the so-called alternative media was putting out something about Russia, and the establishment didn't want Russia demoralized or exposed, if you reverse the present situation, we would be called fake news. We'd say that we were making it up, where's your evidence? And yet here they are, right across the spectrum of everything from hacking to threatening us militarily. The demonization of Russia is based on no evidence whatsoever. They won't produce any because they don't have it. And so this fake news is news that the establishment doesn't want people to hear. And the real fake news is called mainstream journalism. This is the inversion that we're dealing with.
For example, if you point out that no government in the world can pay off its debt, because money is debt as such, and the only way that government can have money is through credit. They say, oh, like, why you, how to say, they simply ignore that issue. And why am I saying it? If our government cannot pay back its debt, and no other government can also pay back its debt, why are the lenders keep lending money? That's the key question. If I were a bank, and you were American government, American state, and I know that only the debt of government just goes up, it never will be repaid, why the private banks are borrowing? That's the key question. And in essence, in the end, you realize that scheme is rigged, that the purpose of that is not for government to pay back the money. That's not the key. The key is to take away government property or state property, to privatize everything, and to basically loan shark government with its own money. Why? Because central bank, for example, in America, it should be government run, and every time government has deficit, government should take directly from federal reserves without borrowing, without
interest.
Without interest. And it's obvious that America always has deficit. So that money from central bank should never be needed to be returned. But instead, you have in America private bank, Federal Reserve, which people think it's a government-run business.
I know.
And then, as they have a monopoly on creation of money, can you imagine to give a private person monopoly on creation of money? Then they borrow that money to government and they loan shark the whole country of United States, and with the money that they have, they control all the media. And then they decide who gets elected and so on. And when I went to election, the treatment of mass media that I got was horrific. They blamed me for everything. They labeled me. They called me a clown, a crazy man, whatever. Any possible, how would you call it?
Any possible discrediting of you?
Yes,
yeah.
but it often was irrational. For example, they accused me of self-promotion. And never had all politicians are self-promoting themselves. But there was never any other politician from the mainstream. He was never accused of self-promotion, although he was all the time on the TV news, you know. It's just like programming, this state TV. And when I started speaking out, they say, oh, he's self-promoting. And then people say, yeah, I will not vote for him because he's self-promoting. It's such a ridiculous accusations.
But that's another point, you see. You have just described the way the media treat anyone from the outside coming into politics, anyone from the outside coming from a different direction, everywhere in the world. Why would so-called individual people called journalists in different countries with different backgrounds and different cultures, why would they all treat outsiders and people questioning and challenging the established order the same? A journalist would say, well, let's see what this person's got to say. This is interesting. Well, how do you say it's all rigged? What do you mean? But they don't. So
they just label it.
If people just take a breath and take a step back and look at it, they'll see that there is a structure that is the same in every country, because it's like a holographic structure. You've got the structure of on a global level, and each part of the structure in a country is a smaller version of the same structure. Therefore, everywhere you go, you see the same thing, whether it's politics or media or anything. It's so blatant. And it is so blatant that they have to keep people focused on a very small area of information, because if they just go out of that just a little bit, it's so blatant, they'll see it.
I would just like to say that when I was working in Germany, I spoke with one older guy, and he told me, Geld regiert Welt, money rules the world. And those who privatized money system, those who enslaved the states and private individuals and corporations and companies, they are the ones who rule the world. It's not politicians, it's not elected politicians. We have, in the Western Hemisphere, we have no democracy. And you can see, for example, Edward Snowden, when he was on Sheremetyevo in Moscow, and he was a whistleblower, and he thought that he would be given asylum by Western democracies, by the free countries. And in his, he was naive, and he said, no, Russia is like tyranny, Russia is dictatorship. I will not ask them for help. I will ask from the free countries, from democratic countries. And then he realized that his requests to be, how to say, allowed to come in a country and given asylum were rejected one by one by all EU members. And then one guy explained that all EU countries are actually American client states. And what this anti-Russia hysteria does, the aim of it is basically to remove the responsibility for financial problems, for election results and so on, from the failed policies, from the policies which are in essence against the people, and just present Russia as a boogeyman who is guilty for anything, from arms race to I don't know, homelessness to any problem.
Yeah, exactly. Finding a scapegoat, but when you see the web, the global web, there are no borders. People still see borders. There are no borders. I mean, you have that German journalist who died recently of a heart attack at the age of 56, who in his last years was exposing the fact, he worked for a major German newspaper, that he was for years given articles by the CIA, not German intelligence, by the CIA, to put in the newspaper under his name, and if he didn't, then he said he would be fired. So what I say to people is, don't, like you just mentioned, don't look at the people who are here today, gone tomorrow, so-called elected politicians. Look at the structure that's always there, including the intelligence network globally. And if you go deep enough into Mossad, and deep enough into the CIA, and deep enough into British intelligence and German intelligence, you'll meet the same people ultimately, because it's a global thing, and the bankers are always there, the military leaders are always there. This is the level where it's controlled. I mean, how crazy, Ivan, when you have elected presidents in the United States who do not have a high enough security clearance to know what's going on in underground bases run by the military in America. So who's making those decisions? It's all an illusion, a deception of freedom and being driven by people when it's being driven by a tiny number.
I will just give one more example. It was like 10 years ago. I was on a bus station, and there was insert from Icke's book on Croatian, and I started reading it, and I said this has logic. And it's so funny how when someone is awake, he wants to awake others. Nobody paid him to stand it on a bus station. It was a free will of an individual with a free thinking mind. And people who think freely are the biggest enemies of today's society. And I remember when we were in Parliament, when my colleague said that our Prime Minister is an EU puppet, then he said that priority of his government will be to eliminate us from Parliament. He didn't say priority of my government will be to solve the problem of unemployment or solve the credit crisis. No, he said to kick you out. Why? Because these failed policies cannot solve problems. And instead of, they say they want to fight against populism. If you want to fight against populism, give people jobs.
Yeah.
Solve credit crisis.
But if you look at
solve the homelessness.
Yeah, you look at the dictionary definition of populism, it's just ruled on behalf of the people. But that's another thing that's been demonized. And why did they, you're right, why did they think this so-called populism is exploding all over the world? It's because people are sick of what's been going on. And there's a great quote from Nikola Tesla, of course, is very, very highly regarded in Croatia, he said about science, but it's true of politics, it's true of everything. You don't have to be sane to think deeply, but you have to be sane to think clearly. And he said it's possible to be completely insane and still think deeply, but it's not possible to be insane and think clearly. And so what they're frightened of is people thinking clearly, seeing how the dots connect, because they're thinking so deeply about the dots, they cannot see how they connect, and they'll never see the picture.
It was shocking for me when you said, because of course there is, I would say, things are happening and it has the logic, and then you realize that behind the scenes things have been done and so on. And you have said, yes, Ivan, there is a truth why something is happening. But then you said, there is a deeper truth behind that truth. And people are not ready for the truth. It's so sad, because to say people obvious truth, you must prepare them. And it goes step by step.
Yeah, step by step. That's why I talk for 10 hours. Step by step by step. If you do the later steps first, people go, this is crazy. But you do it in the right order and you get to the far out steps, then what actually just makes sense after what I've heard before. But how many mainstream media organisations give you hours to explain your background and rewrite the perception of the world? They give you 30 seconds a minute, don't they? You've got that.
Not only that, they cut you out. They say like, oh, he speaks about lizards,
Yeah.
and that's one sentence. And all before and after that, gone.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I'll tell you a wonderful example. I was being interviewed on BBC Radio a few years ago, and we came to the end of the interview. It wasn't very long, about five minutes or so. And the interviewer said, "David, we've got 30 seconds left. Tell me about the reptiles." I spent 30 seconds explaining why that was the most ludicrous question I'd ever been heard in my life. But this is what you're dealing with, and so you have to do it yourself. You have to do your own books. You have to do your own events. And you have to explain it at length in the alternative media.
It's same when they ask me, Ivan, what's your solution for financial crisis?
Yeah.
In one sentence, one sentence. And I say, in order to understand what is solution, you must first understand where the problem comes from. And problem comes from privatization of money supply. That's something as money which is private, which is public good, which is needed by everyone, should be issued by state and not by private entities. And only to tell them that, they would say, oh, but you didn't answer me, you know?
Yeah.
So in order to explain to someone, you need at least 1 hour. And when you tell them, oh, I've written a book, because I have written 2 books about financial system, or watch the video, they will say, oh, that's too long. So people are superficial. They want to understand deeper, but they don't want to give time to understand. They don't want to read books. As in that movie, when it says only 3% of people read books.
Yeah, but I tell you what, I've noticed over the years, I do feel for Americans, and for this reason. From what I've observed over the last 30 years, the United States is a mind control laboratory. What's been going on, and it's run, if you go into the deep, beyond the scene levels of secret societies, America's actually run from Europe. But what happens is they have used America as a mind control laboratory to see what works, to implant perceptions, and this is the crucial thing, what you're talking about now, is to narrow the band of how people see the world and narrow the band of attention span. And so when I was in, of course we've seen fast foods come out of America, fast everything comes out of America. And when I was working in journalism in Britain in the 1970s, you still had some substance. There was still an ability to get some longer interviews and some substance in an exchange with someone. Then out of America, I watched it happen. It was a nightmare for a journalist. Came fast news, where everything had to be short and snappy. Oh no, that's too long. Reports on major incidents of 3 or 4 minutes maximum. And what can you do in that time? As a journalist, you turn up, and in the time you've got on the news bulletin, you've only got time to get the official story of what happened and repeat it. You've got no time to question it, because there's no substance.
Not only that, for example, if you have like terrorist attack, bomb explodes, they can have a live session for hours repeating the same stuff.
That's right.
You will not hear anything new if you listen. You will still hear 3 people killed, and it goes on for hours. And for example, when there is a financial crisis and there is a big collapse, they will not allow anyone who thinks critically,
right,
like Max Kaiser, for example, he's amazing. They will not allow him on mainstream media they will not give him time.
Yeah, it was a classic very recently in Britain when there was the attack by the one man on Parliament. And for at least 2 days, you had all the main 24-hour news channels, Sky, BBC, staked out on the street outside Parliament, had person after person after person, and you're absolutely right, repeating the same stuff, but within the tram lines of acceptability. And then, about 2 days ago, the BBC basically got caught out because they interviewed the employer of the attacker, and obviously thinking they were going to get the usual story. Oh yeah, and he completely turned it on his head. He said, actually, it took me days to come to terms with the fact that he'd done it. He was a lovely man. He wasn't an Islamic radical. Yeah. He was quite at peace with people that weren't Muslims. His focus was on his career. Everyone loved him. And of course, instead of the interviewer, they say, well, this is interesting. I wasn't expecting this. Tell me more. It was, oh, well, thank you very much. And they went on to the next item with no comments.
I will just give an example. There was a status I posted. It was very viral. I said like this. When a Muslim guy comes to England and he kills 3 English people, everybody's gonna say this guy is a monster. All the mass media would say the ideology behind this killer is crazy ideology. We must denounce it and so on. But in the same time, those very same British mass media said, bomb Iraq, go there, kill people. They killed 500,000 Iraqis. So Britain and America, they killed 500,000 Muslims in Iraq. They contaminated the whole country with depleted uranium. They basically created, let's say, fertile ground for extremism, because before these interventions there were no this Muslim extremism. Muslim extremism, all the terrorist attacks happened actually because of American interventionist policy. And instead of answering on question why people hate America, why they oppose this American idea, I'm not speaking about freedom and democracy. I'm speaking about exploiting other countries, about enslaving third world countries with debt, stealing their resources and keeping them in poverty. That's what I speak about. And instead of questioning that, they only fight with not with the causes, but with the actual consequences
of the symptoms.
Yes, and symptoms. And you can't fight against symptoms, and they see they can't, and they still fight against them.
Yeah, my observation of the vast majority of mainstream journalists, and there are some honourable exceptions, is that they suffer from this psychological problem called cognitive dissonance, where you can look at 2 things that totally contradict each other, yet at the same time believe both are true. So this is where it is extraordinary. I mean, I saw it, after the attack on Parliament recently, where the Prime Minister, Theresa May, and other politicians are standing up. Oh, terrorism will never destroy our values. And I thought, the values you voted to bomb Iraq, to bomb Libya, etc., to bomb Syria, but they can't see it. And so you have a journalist, and politicians too, but a journalist, who can look at it, every act of terrorism is bad, every body being killed is bad, but they look at it in isolation, and they can basically wet themselves for days over an attack by one person, but not challenge mass bombing of the innocent.
Yes.
In countries across the Middle East, they do not have this capacity to bring those 2 together and say, hold on a minute, that's far worse than that. But they can't do it. But of course, they've got to pay the mortgage and they've got to be at work tomorrow, I suppose.
I would understand if they called this Muslim killer from London a monster, if they called Bush and Blair monsters too. But they don't.
No.
More people you kill, more polite you are. Because these monsters in suits, they're not called monsters. They are given Nobel Peace Prizes. And although they killed many more people than this guy in London, he killed just 3 people.
Yeah.
How many people, for how many deaths are responsible Bush and Blair? No question on that whatsoever.
Staggering. Not just at the time, but because of what's followed up.
We can go to Vietnam and also...
Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, Henry Kissinger.
Death squads in...
Don't let start on him, correct?
In Latin America.
But these are the contradictions that when you put them together, I find people, basically you're taking the cognitive dissonance and you're actually putting it together, and when people go through that process, they do go, well actually, yeah, who are the biggest terrorists? Yeah, the ones in high-tech machinery above your head, they're the ones.
I will never forget when Israel bombs Gazans in Palestine, and these people in Gaza, they're in the biggest prison in the world. In essence, when you see this blockade of goods and services, you can't get in or out. it reminded me to ghettos in Poland during Second World War. And I didn't notice it until I started to read about Holocaust. I started to read how Jews were treated within those ghettos. And then I see the same thing. I see walls, I see wire, I see mass destruction, I see retaliation, which is beyond imagination. And the whole world will never, for example, the whole world was weeping for Aleppo. But when there was bombing of Gaza, I saw no tears. I saw no tears.
Yeah, but that's another thing, you see. It's another in your face. How close do you want it? Look at the influence that Israel has over the world. Look at diplomatic levels, the platform it has. That country has around 8 million people. It's a sliver of land in the Middle East. So there has to be another story for why that is. There has to be. So
there must be.
We can debate what that story is, but there has to be another explanation. And then you have the reason why they're now, the Britain has accepted this. They've changed the wording of what is said to be anti-Semitism to the point where it encompasses, in effect, criticism of the Israeli government. Yes. It's not a racist in the Israeli government. Because, again, as we talked about earlier, the blatant nature of the fact that a country of less than 8 million people shouldn't have this global influence is so obvious that they have to hold people in a position of perception which never gets beyond it, where they're saying, well, hold on a minute, what's going on? Because it's so obvious that Israel represents a force. It's not in and of itself, it represents a global force.
It's shocking what you just said, and in the mainstream you're not allowed to say that. If you say that, you will immediately be labeled, and people are unable to think for themselves. It's such tragic to say, but vast majority of people, what mass media tell them, they believe it. They don't. They think it's their own conclusions. They think that, but they don't realize those ideas were just implanted in their mind.
Yeah, there's something else I wanted to bring up. See what your take is on this. I was brought up in what you might call, I mean, I reject the whole left-right political spectrum, but I was brought up in a left-wing household that always voted for the British Labour Party and stuff like that. There was a time when the left in politics, which is now being given this name out of America called progressives, that they would stand for freedom of expression, and they, people like students in America during the 60s, they went on marches against the suppression of freedom of expression. But what I see now is the so-called progressive movement, the so-called left, the so-called liberals, but progressives and liberals are not the same, of course, if you look at the definition. They're the new authority. They're the new censors. They're the ones that are telling people what they can and cannot say. They're the ones condemning people as racist when they just make a very mild comment. They've been manipulated to become the new Big Brother and the police of the new Big Brother. And then you look at people like George Soros in America and other billionaires who are funding these progressive groups. Again, there's got to be a story there.
Yes, for example, for me it was strange, why would the Jewish tycoon George Soros care so much about democracy, freedom and human rights in, for example, many countries in the world, but not in Israel, where there is basically racial laws, whose appliance on you depends solely if you are Jewish or non-Jewish, although you are a citizen of State of Israel. So, for example, he would not fight for equal rights of Palestinians. You have separate roads on occupied West Bank. You have roads for Israelis and for Palestinians. It's nowhere in the world like that. You have stealing and occupying a land that does not belong to you. Why doesn't George Soros fund Palestinian human rights activists? For example, Israel is the only country in the world which holds children in jails and trials them through military courts. It's unbelievable. And you have arbitrary detentions which can go on forever in Israel. There are often hunger strikers there. Such news, such things, George Soros doesn't care about them. And then I came to a conclusion that actually he has a huge wealth. He doesn't care at all about freedom, democracy, and human rights.
He's actually said that.
All he cares is about his profit and his influence. For him, human life is worthless.
He's actually said that. There's a quote I use in the talks of him saying that, you know, the consequences don't matter to me, I'm just about making money. So why is he funding progressive groups? Because, simple, if you want to control the game, you've got to control both sides.
Both sides.
So you control both sides and you fund both sides. And of course, when you're coming from one angle, there must be an obvious contradiction when you start funding this side, which is, on the face of it, not good for you. Why is he doing that? Because you control both sides, you control the game.
I must tell you a situation which is very interesting. In our parliament, for example, if there is question who should be a minister of education, then opposition and government have different views. But if the question is, should Croatian troops be sent on Russian border, then there is a consensus. And I'm in shock. I say, wait a minute, you should have been in opposition. Or for example, the question was, should Croatia give its land, the whole Croatia, should it be allowed for NATO to not only have bases for training, but also to make military conflicts from within our state? Should we allow that to NATO? And in our parliament, opposition and the ruling, they both say yes. And I say, wait a minute, you are not a true opposition. You are the same policy. And of course, people are so much duped that they believe that those who are not alternative are alternative and opposition. And the biggest fraud is for people to believe into opposition which is not.
Where are we back now? We're back with what you've just described about the major political party agreement on all the major matters. We're into every country in the world again, virtually. I mean, it's another global expression of this world web. In Britain, it's the same. Look at America. You know, they're arguing over detail and peripheral. Oh yeah, look, they're arguing. There's a debate going on. It's a free country. On all the major things, they think and vote every time the same.
We are a bit older people than, let's say, someone who is in his 20s. But I remember when there was a war in Iraq, and when there was no discussion in the media at all. There was just one-sided propaganda. There was no way you could have two people who think differently having a fair discussion on a TV. And the reason why all this chaos is going on, why these all wars are going on, is purely because there is no freedom to discuss things in the media. And because of that, it's crucial to follow alternative media and people who are raising the collective consciousness like Mr. Icke. And sometimes when I see something on his page, I think myself, wait a minute, this has logic. And sometimes I use his thoughts as my own. And not because he says you must think as I do, but I see all the mainstream informations and I see what Icke says. And I think for myself. And mass media, they have 90% influence on me, and Icke has 10% regarding the time, for example. And nevertheless, I see the explanation of his own more logical than the one from mainstream.
Nice to meet you.
Mr. Icke,
I tell you what, thanks for being here, because, you know, people like me